Welcome to Atlas Live, Atlas Public Policy's live video podcast that brings together industry and policy leaders for lively discussions on the future of clean technology, transportation, the built environment, manufacturing, climate change, and more.
Welcome to Atlas Live. I'm super excited to be joined by Jeff Werner from Panasonic and Jasper Jung from General Motors. We're here to talk about the global clean energy market. Demand is booming, especially for batteries, solar, electric vehicles, and wind. Our new report out just recently tracked nearly $1.1 trillion in manufacturing investments between 2019 and 2025. And the big story is clear. And China dominates the build-out of the clean energy supply chain by every single metric that we measured. And to go into this a little bit deeper, I'm joined by Stephen Naimoli from Atlas. Over to you, Stephen.
Global demand for clean energy is booming, especially for batteries, solar, electric vehicles, and wind power. A new report from us at Atlas Public Policy, supported by the Clean Power Information Project, tracks nearly $1.1 trillion in manufacturing investments between 2019 and 2025. The big story is clear. China is dominating the build-out of clean energy supply chains, while the United States is losing momentum. Batteries alone account for about half of all investment, reflecting their central role in electric vehicles and grid storage. But across clean technologies, Chinese companies are leading by a wide margin, responsible for about 55% of global announced investment. China has built massive domestic capacity and is increasingly expanding overseas, largely to avoid trade barriers and to cement its global leadership. The United States ranks second, with about $236 billion in announced investment, driven by strong growth from 2021 to 2024. But that momentum is faltering. In 2025, the United States saw a net decline in clean manufacturing investment, with more cancellations than new projects. Meanwhile, China continued to add tens of billions in new investments. Looking ahead, global demand isn't slowing down. Solar capacity alone surged more than 30% from 2023 to 2024, and EV sales continue to grow in most of the world. By scaling clean manufacturing, China is shaping the future of the global energy system. And unless current trends shift, the United States risks falling further behind in one of the defining industrial transitions of the century.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a lot to chew on there, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me in the show, Jeff and Jasper. So let's get right into it. China has a sustained lead right now in clean energy manufacturing. And I want to get your perspective from where you all sit in the US. Which parts of that advantage are realistically replicable here? For a long time, we've talked about developing a lot of technology here in the United States and then scaling it abroad. There's an increasing amount of interest here from policymakers and others to try to start to build more capacity here. What can we do? And where can we do, or should I say, what can we do here in the US versus letting it scale abroad? Why don't we start with you, Jasper?
Well, Nick, thanks. And it's great to be here with you and Jeff, and really enjoying, looking forward to this conversation. I think there's a lot that we can do here in building a regional hub that really supports a lot of what we're trying to do around resilience, around diversifying, and competing on the global stage. I think in a lot of these spaces, I think you look at a lot of these inputs on clean energy, the batteries and the applications that they're utilized for, right? We're not just talking about electric vehicles, we're talking about energy storage, we're talking about drones, we're talking about autonomous vehicles, we're talking about, a lot of different emerging technologies that are going to happen. And you look at the value chain that supports that, right? That supply chain, I think, particularly in the midstream, and when I say midstream, you're looking at a lot of the material inputs into the things like batteries, not just sourcing it, but being able to process a lot of the critical minerals and the rare earths, being able to build that up here. We have an incredible base here. I think on batteries alone, I think, over the recent years, it's been over $100 billion worth of investment, 89,000 jobs created. I think, Jeff and Panasonic and our partners at LG and others have been really big, investors and parts of building out that value chain. But we have to look further upstream in terms of where are we getting those imports, how are we getting that? Because I think for General Motors, we have this philosophy of buying where we build, right? And we need to be able to do that here in North America, and to be able to do that with our allies around the world. And that's what we're looking at doing right now, is that vertical integration for the sake of resilience.
Yeah, the whole using these new jargon that we're all learning, midstream,
Yeah.
right, further upstream. What's funny about what you described is you talked about the supply chain that go into the batteries. The batteries itself are part of the supply chain for you all in your vehicles.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated web, piecing it all together. And I want to bring you into the conversation, Jeff, because Panasonic has maybe one of the largest battery manufacturing facilities in the country, where you're assembling stuff, but you got to get all your parts from somewhere else. So tell us about what parts of that supply chain, from your perspective, that could realistically be built here.
Great. Well, Nick, thanks for having me back here. I really appreciate this. And Jasper, it's great to be with you as well. I think your point about building it where making it where you build it, right? Where our customers are is why we're here, right? With the US market is an important market in this space. And I think getting to where we can build that demand to kind of pull this stuff forward is going to be critical to be able to match what's going on overseas. We taught you your original question about sort of China and sort of how have they done it. They've made it a priority. It's a strategy that they followed and have poured an enormous amount of government investment into that space. So I think as we look at how to replicate that, there's been some things that have been starting to be successful. I mean, Jasper, you noted 80 or 90 million in investment in recent years. There's been government policies that have helped drive that, right? 45X being one of those. I think that's another thing that we can continue to do to sort of help drive that investment that then eventually leads to build that demand. But I think your last question about sort of what are some of those things that can help us as a supplier, but our suppliers too, as a supplier ourselves, right? I guess we're midstream, right? Towards the end of the stream.
Right.
We need the resilience of a domestic supply chain, right? And if not a domestic supply chain, a friend-shoring supply chain, right? I think a company like Panasonic, large Japanese company, but has made the decision to have the United States as the manufacturing base, right? We build batteries in Japan, but the bulk of our investment is going into the U.S. market, right? So there's, if we think about how do we replicate it, I mean, there's people smarter than me are making these decisions on where to invest, and then the U.S. is that base. And what we hear a lot is, okay, we need the resilience, we need the options in the United States, and we are sitting on a great potential here. But a lot of our suppliers, they need the scale, they need the demand to kind of have that sort of the demand signals to help get the financing to help build this up. It's a sort of a chicken and the egg conundrum, right? How do we have the demand first without the supply, right? And if we can figure out a way to thread that needle, and I think there are policies that are pushing in that direction, I think that's going to help solve some of these problems.
We're going to definitely get more to policy in a minute, including 45X, but I want to highlight a word that I heard both of you say, resilience as a driver for this. A lot of people moved to Washington, D.C. to work on, public issues for a variety of reasons. Resilience is one that has emerged as a clear major sticking point for a lot of success in business. We saw crazy, constraints on the supply chain following COVID. We need to insulate ourselves from those sorts of shock events. We've got another shock event happening right now with the war in Iran on gas prices. So resilience clearly is emerging as something that a lot of people can rally around to drive policy. Tell us what that resilience looks like for both of you in terms of what it means as a risk for the business.
Yeah, no, it's core to what we are trying to do to our supply chains, and really, it's about taking control of our own destiny, right? And delivering value, consistent, exceptional value for our customers. Because and Jeff mentioned customers, right? Like at the end of the day, that's what matters most, right? For us. And that's the key driver behind what we're trying to do. So we're looking all the way to dirt, water, raw materials in terms of kind of how do we find this in a way that's
dirt.
Yeah, exactly. Competitive, right? Scalable, sustainable, right? And secure, because those are the four pillars of resilience. From our standpoint. The wrong R word. But I mean, I think a big part of that though is also what Jeff said, right? And it goes back to your first question, right? How much of the supply chain, what can we do here in the US? There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we've done here. I mean, I think for us, for GM, we've invested a lot in manufacturing here and R&D and talent, right? And we sell the most cars and employ the most people here in the US out of any automaker, right? But then you look at the opportunity to build on top of that, right? There's a lot that you can do here, but there's also a lot that you can't do, and you have to do with your allies. You have to work with technology providers, with material providers, components, or like component manufacturers, right? And you have to build that kind of ecosystem with your allies and with your partners in order to support that industrial base that we've already all established here, and we look to continue to grow on. So that really is about resilience in terms of kind of finding that right balance and building that hub and that network.
I want to drill down a little bit more into batteries and talk a little bit more about this resilience piece. Right now, a lot of the components that go into batteries are sourced from China for sure, but increasingly there's activity going on both in the U.S. and in allied countries, as you guys alluded to try to build up some capacity to either extract and or process these kind of minerals. The report that we put out recently, I should say, showed that nearly half of the global investments that are going into the clean economy right now are batteries. Just assembly and such. We didn't even track all of the upstream components to that. When we think about like what is going to be possible, not just in the U.S. but in other allied countries, like what parts of that upstream supply chain for batteries is going to be doable for us right now? It's not happening. Many think that it could take years for that capacity to be built, but to what extent do we need it for resilience?
I think it's going to be critical. I mean, you talk about sort of some of these I would say friend-shoring kind of countries, areas where a lot of that investment is going into either in extraction, but often in the sort of the processing side of it, right? I think the ability for us as global companies to still have access to those global supply chains is critical, right? Particularly as I think obviously we want to see as much of it done in the United States or North America. It's going to take time, right? It takes time for just the investment to go in, but also to get to the quality. There's 2 or 3 years of testing that goes into, once you have sort of the initial sort of production to get to the level that Panasonic and GM do not want to recall, right? So this has to be at the highest level. It just builds time into the system. So I think as we think about sort of these other sources growing, and we need to have access to that in the meantime, right? Without then, with an eye on still building that here in the United States. But I think, as you said, the U.S. We're in a global economy, right? I think this is like it doesn't make sense for us to do everything, right? I think there's certain high value side of it, and we're doing the production here. We're doing the R&D and the manufacturing. I think there are other parts of that process that it makes sense to have a global supply chain, particularly countries like Japan and Korea is obviously very central to this. It's all part of that equation. But I think there has to be a recognition that we are behind, right? And it's going to take some time to kind of get us up there. And those of us who are already sort of doing it in the United States, let's not sort of hamper that growth that we're having. So cutting off those access.
I want to follow up on growth for a second, but over to you, Jasper, just on this, supply chain and upstream, need that you mentioned earlier. GM's investing in some of that too, right? You guys are trying to put money into these things to try to, at least prove out that these investments are worthwhile. So tell us a little bit about how GM looks at, what your role is in facilitating this more robust supply chain.
Yeah, I think when we look at this, it's about both the supply chain and manufacturing, right? When we look kind of holistically at the entire value chain, right? And we pride ourselves in being able to offer a broad portfolio at value for our customers of both EVs and internal combustion engine products, right? We have 12 EVs. We have one of the largest kind of portfolio of EVs available now. And we're able to shift and adapt our manufacturing and our supply chain in order to accommodate customer needs and wherever the market's at, right, in terms of transportation technology. Now, the thing really is about adjusting to that market demand, right? So we do need to find the balance in between that and our ability to take control of our own destiny. We have patient capital, right? But we don't want to strand it. We want to make sure that we're smart and we're strategic about how we're doing it. And we've picked and we're working with a great kind of range of partners all across the value chain to really deliver on this, and developing technologies and chemistries ourselves. Like in just north of Detroit in Warren, Michigan, we have small scale battery manufacturing. We are developing new chemistries like a lithium manganese rich chemistry that improves energy density and range at a more competitive cost, right? And we're looking
do you
at,
think that for us to succeed as a country, let's just put our American patriotic hats on in our 250th birthday, right? Like, do we need to be manufacturing those kind of batteries at scale here for us to succeed in the clean economy, or is it possible for us to rely more on a global supply chain?
yeah, I think we absolutely do. I think competition, diversification creates more value for customers. And I think supports business and supports an entire industry, right? I think the more competitors you have on the market, the better. And we need to be able to compete in this space.
One of the things you brought up and I want to follow up on is this idea of like really kind of adapting to the market demands. GM Energy exists now. Ford Energy exists now. Tesla Energy existed for a long time. The auto companies and transportation companies are moving more and more into energy as a revenue stream and business opportunity. Tell us about what that looks like for you all from an energy storage standpoint. Like, I don't think that 5 years ago people would have thought GM Energy would not just build charging stations, but also maybe getting involved in energy storage business. So tell us about what that looks like.
I think it creates a massive opportunity for all the reasons that the report lines out, right? In terms of the growth of clean energy demand and in terms of the need for more investment. And I think it creates another market opportunity for this technology, and also validates a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of, right, EVs are going to be the core driver of scale, right? And we do think the industry will get there, right? When the market takes us there, right? But it also validates the fact that there are other applications and other sectors where we stand to benefit by being in that space, right? And there's a huge opportunity there, I think, for a lot of reasons around the value it can provide to American consumers, around, security interest, resilience, as we've been talking about, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it just really kind of validates a lot of the points in the report.
So Panasonic, you guys are also entering the energy storage business here in the U.S. You brought up the 45X credit earlier. When you look at what Congress did last year in revisiting the policy framework for clean energy, that was the tax credit that was, in my opinion, most valuable to the clean economy, and that was the one that stayed. So there's a bit of a success story there in a sense of there is a nonpartisan technology in the clean economy, and it's batteries, and it happens to also be the most important one. Is the credit as it's defined today like work for you guys in the energy storage / EV business, or is there more policy that's needed to really get to a place where your factories are going to hum with clients lining up to buy them?
So as you noted, obviously we're fully invested in producing at scale in the EV battery space, both in Nevada and Kansas. We always knew that the EV market wasn't going to be like this. It's going to go like this, right? And there's going to be headwinds. The energy storage side of things are helping us sort of spread the risk on that, right? So we are going to be building energy storage batteries in Kansas alongside EV batteries.
Just real quick on that, so people understand like what that means. Like, do you have to set up a separate line? Is it just going to run on the same line? Like, was that super expensive for you guys to put in before you keep going? I think people need to really understand, because this could be a role for policy.
It's a similar product, but it's different. So it requires retooling, and it requires a significant amount of investment, right? I think as we think about sort of the 45X and what it meant for EV battery manufacturing, it was critical, right? And I think it was always our president of Panasonic Energy always said, look, we need this to kind of get us fighting fit and competitive, and then it needs to go away because we need then to be able to do this on our own. And that's exactly how it's sort of created. That has sort of kind of helped us sort of kind of manage these headwinds, and we're full speed ahead in both Kansas and in Nevada. 45X is not going to help us on ESS, on battery storage, right? It's a lower output. The batteries don't qualify, but I think it's a different business model there. I think with EVs, it was all about reducing the price of EVs, right? Getting those competitive in the marketplace. That's what 45X helps us do, right? It helps us ultimately have a lower priced product for the consumer. That's not as critical, I think, in energy storage.
You can compete without the tax credit already in energy storage.
I don't want to take that off the table. So and I think we'll see how this develops, but we are seeing massive growth in without it, right? So I think there's a different business model there. I think as we start, we're seeing that for us, this business is doubling each year for the foreseeable future, 2-3 years. So, obviously we're seeing with the debate on data centers now, a lot about cost and sort of, and I think batteries can be part of that solution, right? In terms of managing the energy distribution and peak shaving and things like that. But right now, the customers need the product.
When you say right now, is that like 2026 and 2027, or is that like 2026 through 2030? What is now to you?
In terms of doubling?
In terms of like what you guys have line of sight on and for demand?
I think at least the next 3 years. And then, so there's a lot of promised investment in the space. It doesn't always pan out, but even if there's a fraction of that, the demand, we're grappling now with the capacity that's needed to keep up with that.
That point I don't think is really well understood right now by the public, given the increased and overwhelming attention on cancellations and other sorts of challenges. So what do you think about this one, Jasper?
No, I mean, you look at the 45X tax credit, and then you also kind of look at the level of investment, the level of jobs that have been created, right? As a result of that, I think going forward, I don't want to speak for Jeff, but I don't think Jeff or I are saying, let's take it off the table.
Right. It's in law.
I think realistically, you need policies like that and any type of policy to kind of work as a broader kind of several tools in a toolkit that really support American manufacturing, right? So you have to think about, okay, are you going to reward and incentivize more investment here by U.S. and allied companies going forward? Are you going to really kind of build that ecosystem that we were talking about at the beginning, that regional hub, in order to compete, right? And I think that's a really big part of it, because commercialization of these tech, we've always been good. We've been great as a country and with our partners at innovation. We coming up with chemistries, coming up with new technologies, putting these out on the road, but commercializing them at scale, right? That's really where a lot of these policies that we need to work with the US government on, and governments around the world, right? In order to create a space, right, where protect a space where we can do that, but the incentives also need to be there in order to kind of make that happen.
I got to probe a little bit more on that, because Secretary Rubio was over in China very recently, and when he was interviewed and asked like, what's your takeaways and whatnot, the first thing he brought up was lithium-ion batteries. We invented the technology here, we did not manufacture it at scale, and now it's owned by other countries, essentially, in at least at the level that we could have had we kept going with it. So what do we need to do to make sure, from a policy standpoint, that we get to this shiny object? We continue to innovate, as you said, but how do we get to the point where we're actually scaling the manufacturing here?
Well, I think
do we need policy for that?
I think we absolutely do. I think because, to Jeff's point before, this isn't going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen on our own. Like, collaboration with governments, collaboration with our partners are absolutely critical. Policies can be put into place to help provide the clarity and the long-term certainty that we need in order to develop, commercialize, and scale those technologies going forward, right? And you need a combination of things like that in order to kind of look at ways to define and protect national security interests around this stuff, right? Like there's a lot of debate around batteries. There's a lot of debate around EVs, and a lot of the associated technologies, right? In terms of kind of better understanding what's in and what's out, right? And then in terms of what's out, what can we do here, to your very first question, right? And then in order to do that, then you need things like the production tax credits being targeted towards the right things, battery inputs, rare earth magnets, right? Semiconductors, things like, I mean, there's a whole slew of technologies that go into a lot of different applications in a lot of sectors going forward. So that's the type of collaboration, and the type of value that policy can provide.
So one of the things our report showed was that there's rapidly expansion of manufacturing overseas as a tactic to get into new markets. So if you've got issues like FIOC, like foreign entities of concern or whatever, depending on how those rules and regulations are structured, setting up manufacturing facilities in friendlier countries can work around those things. And there's there could be a whole podcast just on examples of how that's done. What does that mean for competition from your perspectives? When we look at, just to give you an example, what we cited in our report was China set up manufacturing facilities in Hungary and in Morocco. Chinese owned companies have invested to build manufacturing capacity in these countries to open up new markets like Europe and potentially even the United States, because we have trade agreements there with Morocco. So what does this mean for you guys?
I think you have to approach it very cautiously, right? I think 45X and the new 45X that we have now sets very clear, the rulemaking is still ongoing, but it's going to set very clear requirements for what those investments need to look like, right? And it's going to be stringent, right? I mean, it's going to be in a lot of the cases, it's going to be very difficult to achieve some of those requirements in order for these inputs to count towards 45X credit, right? Which is going to drive a lot of that activity. So I think it's important. I think those are options for us as we need a global supply chain. But I think in many cases, it's going to still have a bit of risk associated with the current policy or where policy is going to go, right? I mean, we're not at the end state in terms of what policy the U.S. is going to have to drive sort of the localization, or at least, shifting some of the supply chain around.
Just real quick on that. Do you feel like we're sort of approaching a steady state, or do you feel like it's so tumultuous still in the energy policy space that like it's hard to predict and it's hard to make decisions as a company on what you should be doing here?
I think there are a lot of different policies that are making it hard to make large investment decisions right now. Tariffs, a lot of the changes. I would hope that we kind of get to some sort of equilibrium in terms of the sort of the policies that are sort of driving the investment here. Maybe we will look, particularly as sort of the energy storage battery market starts to really come online. Maybe there's some additional things that we can be doing to drive that, to localize that. So I certainly don't. It's hard to say, and I get this within my company, that they want a sort of a pathway to sort of clarity and stability, and I'm just not able to do it. I give that right now in the U.S. And I think you just need to recognize that and understand it as best we can. Despite all that, we are continuing to pour massive amounts of investment in the United States. We're at scale. It's things are moving ahead, but it's not without sort of some uncertainty.
Yeah. And then, so, for you, Jasper, on that point, you mentioned earlier, you got some patient capital, but you need to make sure that you're, always balancing, short-term pressures in financial markets with your longer-term, desire to be a company that's around for another 100 years. What I love about working and talking with companies of both of your statures is that, like, y'all have been around for so long that you know how to, overcome the headwinds of a moment in not just politics and markets, but all kinds of facets of life as technology evolves. You guys adapt to those evolutions. So you're well positioned to sort of accommodate what the needs are, even if it's tumultuous and unpredictable. So expand a little bit earlier on your comment about balancing those risks and rewards for GM. And maybe tell us a little bit about how you look at this near-term policy uncertainty in the U.S. and what it means for GMs.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, Jeff laid it out really well. And we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth on a lot of the policies. And I think that's partially job security for us and to be able to help the company navigate that right successfully and to help ensure that we are around for another couple hundred years going forward. I mean, when we look at batteries and EVs, we do believe that EVs are the end game, right? For the automotive industry. It's a better technology, it's a better experience. And it's about making it competitive and ensuring that we're ready when the market's ready for it, right? Going forward. And policies are supposed to help, right? Kind of alleviate some of that near-term risk going forward and provide that long-term certainty as we go through that, right? And so that's what we're always seeking, whether it's the regulatory environment, whether it's the trade and tariff environment, whether it's incentives and other industrial policy, to support R&D, to support manufacturing here, right? I think at the end of the day, we want to be able to ensure that any policies we support or take the opportunity to work on and utilize really do support American manufacturing. But I will say that we have to ensure that, again, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while. I mean, this isn't our first crack at building these supply chains and addressing some of these gaps, right? Like in critical minerals and battery supply chains specifically, right? And we've looked at different types of policies. We've looked at different events, right, over the past couple of years that have validated the need for that, right? And we just need to keep working towards that longer term certainty. But I think we do a good job of managing near-term risks and near-term fluctuations, I would say, right? Because we are adaptable, right? And we need to do that, but we need to ensure that our supply chains are there with us all along the way, right? Like, I think you have large companies like General Motors, like Panasonic, like many of our industry peers and competitors, right? That can absorb and navigate, right? And that can adapt, right? But then you have to think about the tier 5, tier 6, tier 7 sub-tier suppliers, right? Are they going to be able to survive this and come along for the ride with us? Because we need them all. Like, we need our partners to absolutely make it work.
Yeah. And that, as you said, that's a job creator for people who work in Washington, D.C. and work in policy, because it's a super complicated space to balance. So so we're out of time. But I just want to say thank you to both Jasper and to Jeff for joining me on Atlas Live to talk about this critically important issue. And we'll be back again soon with another episode. Thanks a lot.